Welcome everyone. I see a lot of new faces. This is our 29th Platform Academy session, the first one of 2023. My name is Lisa Hohenstein. I live in Germany and I run this Academy series. I've been doing this for about 1.5 years. I've been at ServiceNow for almost 4, and in the ServiceNow space for over 6 years now, almost 7. I am very glad to be joined by some of my colleagues from our product success management team. They're responsible for parts of the Now platform and creator workflows. I'll let them introduce themselves one by one. Please introduce yourself. Our main speaker today is Miguel.
Hey, my name is Miguel Donayre. I am part of the product success team here at ServiceNow, and we work with the platform foundation or platform stuff. And I've been at ServiceNow, again, just like Lisa, almost 4 years. I'm like 2 months shy of 4 years, but I've been part of the ecosystem for about 10 now. I'm based out of Washington, DC, and welcome. And thank you. I want to say thank you, and I appreciate you guys spending time with us today.
Absolutely. Jared?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jared Munt. I work on the team with Miguel as a product success manager, focusing on the core platform things and also the data protection technologies.
And last but most awesome is Paige, who will not be speaking much today, but please give a small introduction.
Sure. So obviously I don't have much of a voice right now, but I'm Paige Duffy. I also work on the same team with Miguel and Jared. So I'm a product success manager here at ServiceNow for about a little over 6 months, but I've been around ServiceNow since, well, it's been about 13 years. Math is hard right now. So yeah, that's what all the voice I've got right now.
Thank you. Still, thank you for joining us. So Paige will help keep an eye on the Q&A and chat. So as I said, this is our 29th session. Today we'll be speaking about managing your deployments in ServiceNow. Just in case you know our lovely safe harbor slide, if there's anything that we're going to be mentioning or alluding to that may be forward-looking statements, please don't make any purchasing decision based on anything we talk about today. And then I think the next one is housekeeping. Oh yes, of course. Webinars. No, do the webinars first. I am very pleased to see so many new names joining us today. Welcome back, or welcome to this Platform Academy. We have a number of other Academy sessions in our portfolio. We have our colleagues speaking about Next Experience, mobile, virtual agent, analytics, and all kinds of awesome stuff. And you can find the registration on the same page that you signed up for today. And then the housekeeping items. So we save time for Q&A, but depending on how things go, we might pick up questions during the session. Please use the Q&A panel in the bottom of your Zoom window. And with that, I think I can hand it over to Miguel.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Before we begin, we have a quick poll. And we just want to know what are you guys using for deployment methods, right? So there's 1 through 4. One of these questions are going to give you that side-eye judgment look, but no question is wrong. So there's update sets and source control, app repo, and then I only work in prod, right? So we will cover these today. If you don't know what some of them mean, no worries, but we definitely just curious to understand what you guys are using out there.
This is a multiple choice question too, so you can choose multiple options. I love the memers who work in prod. It's already 10%.
Just in prod.
Yeah, guilty for those random configuration changes in the past. I'm guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
It happens, right? It happens from time to time, right? So
sometimes.
Yeah.
So we're looking at about over 80% who replied already. Over 90% use update sets. Just 3%, one person has dabbled in source control. So it's good that we're talking about this today. And 23% are using application repository.
Good. That's awesome. It's typical. Good to see that, right?
Yes.
All right. So
share this first.
let's go over the agenda real quick. Just to understand what we're doing today. We want to cover application components and scoping, and that's just kind of lay the contextual layout so we mean the same thing, right? So when I say like application files or components, we kind of mean the same thing. And then we're going to talk about application scoping, which is important because it opens up a lot of tools that you can use within ServiceNow. Deploy methods, right? This leads into deploy methods, and this is more like what can I use to move my code through my stack. And then finally, we're going to end it off with the strategies, deployment strategies, and architect. Like, what does it look like? How can I enable it? And then what are the strategies around it, right? So let's go ahead and jump into the application components and scoping. Again, this is just an understanding. So when we say it looks at the application files or components, this is what we mean. And then when we say scopes, right? Application scopes, there's actually 4 scopes we use in ServiceNow. And it just goes over like what those are, right? There's the traditional scoped app, which is the X _ company name. The ServiceNow apps, which is SN _ and then the name. The store or the third-party apps you get at the ServiceNow store, and then your global scopes. And a couple of things in the application components or files. What we don't capture right today is the data in those tables, right? Like records and incident, right? We don't capture the actual incidents. It's not considered an application component. You can force it, right? You can force it into an application file, but natively, traditionally out of the box, we don't consider those application components. All right, let's jump into scoping. All right, this is a visual representation of what we just covered on the scoping level. Your custom apps, which are your scoped apps, your global apps, and in a little bit, I'm going to talk about global app bundles, right? Something new, well, newish. And it's really important that we mention it because it's gonna apply later down when we talk about the methods. And then your ServiceNow store app, right? And then you're out of the box scoped ServiceNow out of the box scoped apps, right? Like your employee service center or some of your HR or CSM components, right? Those are like, even though they're ServiceNow out of the box, they're still in a scope. All right. Global app.
Quick pop quiz. When did scoped apps come out? Do you remember what the release was that they were first introduced?
It's late.
Put your answers in chat. Let's have everybody answer.
Yeah, I want to say either Geneva or right before Geneva.
Think right before Geneva.
Yeah, Helsinki. Yeah.
The other way. I'm as I remember it. I see we have some things coming in, Geneva, Jakarta era. I don't want to take up too much time. It's just a random pop quiz. But I believe the answer is Fuji.
Fuji, wow.
That's long.
But nobody used it. They were quite buggy at the time. A lot of cross-scope issues. So going into Geneva was more of the, actually using it era.
I think I started with scoped apps then, because my first instance that I worked on was a Geneva instance.
Yeah, likewise. That's my first dabble in the ServiceNow was in Geneva with the scoped app. So
and I remember that because the first PDIs came out and they had Fuji loaded on them.
Nice.
So another pop quiz question for history for a different day.
Cool. All right, global bundles. Back to the topic. Global bundles was something introduced in the San Diego-ish release, and what it is it gives you the ability to create an application inside the global scope, right? So we like to refer to it as a global app bundle, and it's not the same as a scoped app, right? And the subtle differences in there is the security feature. And traditionally in your scoped apps, you can designate delegated developers or the collaborators, that new feature that came out recently, right? So you either have delegated developers or your collaborators. You don't have that ability in your global bundles, right? So just keep in mind that if you decide to double that, doesn't have the same security features. It's not the same walled off garden, right? People can still access the global things if they have global permissions and modify those things, right? But what it does do is it opens up the door for you to use source control and app repo with your global bundles, right? So it's a game changer, I think, right? It helps a lot of people. It also helps with management of your configurations, right? So it's like you want to go like, hey, what changed them out of the box, right? Instead of going to like the last update and who did it, right? You can just simply go to the application and say, oh, it was changed with this ITSM app, global app bundle. All right. Next slide is the application customizations. A lot of the times people buy an application that's a 90% solution, right? But that other 10% is what you need to modify for your needs, right? So that's what we call application customizations. And it is a scoped app, right? But it kind of sits on top of that application you bought, and then you make modifications to work with it, right? And if you ever modify them and change it inside your My Company app menu, in there you can actually see two different changes now. You have the latest version and then your customization version, right? So you can track what's going on. It's important because you manage it the same way you do any other development. So we just wanted to call it out here.
Yeah, great core feature that was missing for a long time. If you were trying to modify security incident response or something in your environment.
Right. And sometimes like people's like, it doesn't work. If it doesn't work in Studio, you can just switch to the UI interface and it'll still capture it, right? So a lot of the times we get, it's like, hey, we try to modify this, right? Customize an app and it's not working. But it doesn't really, sometimes, most of the time, it won't work in Studio, right? If it doesn't, just switch to the UI interface, make sure you're in the right scope, and it should work. It still should work. Yeah,
and this is going to become even more important in future releases when we have I think we have a future platform academies where we're going to talk about upgrade plans.
Yeah.
And this will be one of the things that flows into your upgrade plans and makes your time to upgrade really easy.
Great point. So now we're going to go over deployment methods. Now, before we go there, let's take a stop and see if anybody has any questions about the things we covered or comments or anything. No?
Yep, well, we're watching chat. Nothing has popped up, but feel free to throw stuff in the Q&A and also the chat.
And if you guys have any questions, man, just go ahead and throw it in there. Don't feel like you have to wait, right? We can answer as we go. I want this as an open forum as much as we can. All right, development methods.
One coming in. What apps make a bundle?
So global app bundles are basically stuff in the global, right? Let's go back to that slide, right? So global app bundles is basically things in a slide. Let's close this out. So incident, right? So incident is a common one. PPM is another common one, right? They sit on a global level, right? There's no really like scope for it, but you want to make modifications for it. So what you would do is you create a global app bundle and capture those changes in that bundle. And that's, even though it still sits in that global scope, it's in an application, right? So you can easily distinguish the changes in that incident table based on the application and still keep it on global.
Yeah, I like the name app bundle better than global scoped app, which is what we used to call it, because then it still had that word scope in there. Global app bundle, I really like that standardization.
It's easier to distinguish, right? Because we were saying like, yeah, it's still an application, but it's still global, right? So it's like app bundle is like the perfect word for it.
Yeah.
So did that help clear up your question? Let's go. Let's keep going. All right, so deploy methods. So the most common deploy methods that we have are your update sets, right? Your source control, and that's just the integration to Get from Studio. So whatever Get repository you're using is just an integration from ServiceNow in Studio to your repository, and we call it source control. And then application repository, or app repo as we like to call it. And that's ServiceNow's kind of product and version, like product and functionality we use for same thing, for code deployment and build deployment. All right, and Jared's gonna go ahead and talk about update sets since it's near and dear to his heart.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I always take the side of update sets on internal discussions where we're play devil's advocate, source control versus app repo, which is better. So yeah, I'm kind of known as the update set proponent because it's that trusty hammer in your tool belt. It's been proven over a lot of years. As the poll showed when we started the presentation, that's a large majority of what's in use out there in the world, getting stuff into production. And so that also means it's the most known. I think we bumped forward a slide.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's the most known out there in the world for administrators, developers. So it's kind of proven. Yeah, and depending on your organization, you might have one update set per story, one update set per release. It just depends. It's flexible in that capacity. I don't know the trivia on this one when batching was introduced. I'm gonna guess Jakarta or Madrid.
Knowledge 2017 is when I found out about it. It was my first knowledge. It was exciting. I learned about batching.
So probably Jakarta era then.
Yeah,
that was going to be my guess. Jakarta or Kingston. So yeah,
close enough.
You can move things between instances, either directly connecting it with a set of credentials that no longer is required to be a full admin for that service account to move things between instances. You can export to a file and email it to somebody and import that way. So again, it's flexible. I like that we called out includes delete records on here because when we get into the other technologies, it isn't automatic for deletes. You can get them in, but it's not obvious and it's not automatic on some of those other ones. Some of the criticisms and weaknesses of the update sets are different developers can step on each other's toes. Whether you're working in the same instance or different instances, there is that potential. The update set preview is a relatively simple preview. It's just the last person to touch the record wins. And so even if a script include has some older data into it, it's a chance of including an old function in a script include because of how different developers are working on it. And also, yeah, there's not published supported APIs. It's not part of our out-of-box CICD spokes to move update sets. There is some community movement on that. Before I joined ServiceNow, that was one of the sessions I did with Live Coding Happy Hour with Andrew Barnes and Brad Tilton back in November of 2020. I looked it up before the show today, where we did some update set automation with Integration Hub, created a custom action that called some hacky script include that used some of the same functions that the ServiceNow UI actions uses to move update sets, but we were just doing it with Integration Hub. So everyone wants, I think we'll talk a little bit more about how it works on a later slide, but yeah, in the world where everybody wants better, faster, and stronger tools to keep evolving, I would say my comment with that is within update sets, if you want to stay in update sets, but continue the evolution, think about it with that build versus buy conversation. There are some partners that are focusing on this and have some products for sale. And so I haven't personally installed and used them, but if anyone has used any of those partners, I can't think of any of them besides xtype.io at the moment, but I'm interested. Reach out if you have any feedback and have used these products. And then also the build versus buy, or you can roll your own. You can hack together some things with what's published out there under the community.
Nice. One more thing I wanted to point out is the batching. With batching, you're able to deploy across different scopes, right?
Yeah.
And it's important because you can't do that with you can't really do that with the rest of them, right? So in one batch update set, you can have as many scopes as you can and still deploy as you want.
So we have some questions coming in. Maybe before we move on to the next topic, we'll pick up the ones that are about update set. So one is when pulling update sets from one environment to another through an update source, is the connection required to be ASIC auth?
I'm gonna guess yes on that, because it's actually talking to a processor on the remote instance, and the processor is kind of like the precursor to the scripted REST APIs, and I'm not sure if those are if that's even customizable. I know the role is able to be for that service account is not a full admin anymore, but I think that connection is not configurable at the moment. Other shout out to other products like adaptive authentication and REST API access policies, where you can enforce IP restriction and force OAuth, for example, for your other API endpoints and table APIs and things like that. But the instance-to-instance communication for update sets, I don't think we can force that to be OAuth, which is what I believe the question was going after.
So another one about update sets in chat. Can update sets be used to move initial configurations for plugins between instances? So for example, to make it install and configure a service graph connector for SolarWinds on all instances? I think that's an awesome question. And I just now see that Paige has answered in chat.
Yes.
Yes. I was actually going to also recommend that you might look into upgrade plans. I'm being told that they may be able to include some things like turning on plugins as part of the upgrade plan. I'm not 100% sure on that. They are part of Tokyo though, so.
Correct. Yes. I love Paige's answer in the chat. I don't have anything to add to that, but yes, another shout out for a future session on upgrade plans, because installing plugins is part of the upgrade plugin or upgrade plan orchestration steps.
Yeah.
So I think the rest is more about app repo. So maybe we'll continue and then pick up those questions later.
We'll get there. Right, sure. So source control is our next topic, right? So with source control, obviously it has its strengths and weaknesses. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I do want to highlight some of them, right? So one of the strengths that I really like about app repo is that it opens the ability for your CICD APIs, right? This is like, it really is like a semi-true, right? Almost automation of your pipeline from either ServiceNow or your Git repository, right? So like GitHub, GitLab, you can use Git Actions. And there's actually some videos out there, and I think we posted it on here, where Charn, the outbound or the inbound PM, he actually did a video on doing those, right? So it's one of the things that I like about it, right? You call it out, like you can really automate this. Another thing about source control is selective publishing, right? And what I mean by that is you have the ability to create branches within ServiceNow, and you can switch between branches as you go in development, right? So an example of that is like working on your app. You're working on Sprint 2 branch, and then a break fix comes in, right? You have the ability to switch off that branch, create a new branch for your break fix, and then publish that or merge it to your master and distribute that out, right? And then when you're done, you can come back and work on your Sprint 2 branch, right? So the selective publishing is really a nice feature on that. Again, delete records, right? It captures delete records. But some of the challenges we have with source control, and I really wanted to point this one out in particular, is that there's a limitation about the ability to use those branches on a single instance, right? So if you only have one dev environment, you can only work one branch per application on that instance, right? So an example of that is that you have app A and you have two dev teams working on app A, but only one instance, and both of them have different branches. That means one team at a time can only work on the application if they have two branches, right? So app A, team A has team A branch, one instance, you can only work that one branch per instance, right? So it's a limitation. It's better for you to understand up front, right? And help you make the decision if this is the right tool for you. Now, if you have multiple dev environments, then sure, right? Every instance can have their own branch and you can work on the same application, right? So, I want to reemphasize this, right? Well, one one branch per application per instance. Another one is the knowledge in your Git repository, right? We're asking you, you have to have that knowledge, because there's a couple of things you need to do in your repository, right? For every scope in ServiceNow, it needs its own repository in Git, right? Whatever you're using for Git has to have its own repository. Second, after every major change to your master branch or main branch, you have to rebase, right? And you have to apply changes on your instance, right? It's key. People forget that step about rebasing, and it could lead to problems down the road, right? So you have to remember those things, that after every major change, you have to rebase and you have to apply changes. And for every scope, you need its own repository. All right. And everything else is pretty much there, right? Managing and stashing, right? We talked about that. You can switch branches, but there's that overhead of understanding like the management of that, right? If I switch, you got to manage that and understand how stashing works. What stashing is, as when you switch branches, those changes you made, you can push them aside to just put them like in a holding thing and say, I want to stash these until I'm ready to use them again in another branch, right? So all that, it's kind of like additional steps when you're working within source control.
There are some upgrades, updates to stashes lately, though. So I think you can now selectively apply them again.
Yep.
You can name them, and also for the branch switching, it used to remove and reinstall your app until a couple of releases ago, and thereby also dropping all of your demo data. That is not happening anymore. So now when you switch the branch, it'll do the delta and you'll keep your demo data as far as possible. So some improvements are being made.
Good call out. So any questions on this? And if you have them later on, it's fine. I want to give you that chance to ask any questions while we're on the topic.
Yeah, we have some flow charts with some more in-depth examples.
App Repo. Let's talk about App Repo. Some of the questions came up. So App Repo, again, it's an application repository. It's a ServiceNow product. App Repo, in my opinion, or what I really like about App Repo is that it's really admin friendly for deploying applications. You just really go to your My Company application menu, and it's just like a plugin or a store app. You can see the latest version, or if it's ready to install, right? You have it installed, ready to install. Or if a new version's out, right? New update, you can see that a little red button comes up. It's like, here's an update. Do you want to publish, right? So I think it's really friendly, especially if you're limited in your ability to deploy, right? And you have to, additional resources, you can pick up an admin that doesn't know how to deploy, and it's really friendly, I think, on that end.
And shout out to the roles required. There's some additional roles that will allow a non-admin to deploy from the certain things from the app repo, if depending on what your change management strategy is, and that can be really nice to not require half of your team to have full admin in prod.
Yeah, good call out. And then another thing is that it also has the ability for CICD automation. So same thing, it lets you use the APIs. And in fact, App Engine Studio, which is another one of our products, App Engine Studio uses a functionality or a product called Pipeline, which automates that deployment process, and it uses App Repo and some of the APIs to do that movement between your stacks, right? So it's a really neat feature. I like it. The possibilities are there, right? So also automating your whole development pipeline for App Repo. Now let's talk about some of the challenges or the weaknesses that App Repo has. One of the major ones, right? One of the ones that whenever I talk to a client or a customer, this is one of the things that either they just don't understand, or it's just a misunderstanding. There's no selective publishing when it comes to App Repo. And what I mean by that is, again, let's use that scenario that I'm working on sprint 2 and a break fix comes in, and you want to fix the break fix and pause, sprint 2. You can't do that with App Repo. App Repo doesn't really look at the update stats. It looks at the application files. So whenever you publish the App Repo, it takes all the application components or files associated to the application and it publishes it, regardless if it's in work, not in work. It just takes it all and publishes it. So a lot of the times when people run into issues with app repo is that they don't understand that it doesn't use update sets. It looks at the application file. So there is no way to say, hey, I just want to publish this and that. There are methods I've seen out there that people have kind of circumvented that, where they use source control and stash their changes and then publish it and then reapply the stashes. But out of the box, normally it doesn't do that, right? So it's either all or nothing. It's a really aggressive stance when it comes to publishing the application. Another thing I want to talk about is the leaks not being captured. I know we mentioned this on the other ones, but out of the box, natively, default setting for app repo, it does not capture deletes, right? You do have to set a certain couple of system properties that allows you to capture deletes, but natively it doesn't capture deletes, right? And people, I see it all the time. It's like, it's not capturing. I'm deleting this form or this table or these whatever. It's not capturing it, and it's because of the system property.
Yeah. Service portal specifically.
Yeah.
When you're reconfiguring, you're developing a portal, a lot of times it just deletes all of the records and creates new records. And so you overlay those two things together. It can be frustrating if it's not configured for that.
Right. A couple of things I do want to mention about app repo. I know we put that limited on-prem support, but with app repo, as long as you're hosted in the ServiceNow cloud, you don't have to do anything extra. It's already configured, it's already set up, and there's no additional cost. So if you want to start using it today, you can, right? It's there. For your on-prem or self-hosted solutions, right? People that are decided to take their stuff off of the cloud, we do have an offering. It's called, we do have an app repo for you. So it's called SHAR. We call it SHAR internally, self-hosted app repo. And it lives in the app and in our ServiceNow app store. So you can have the ability to put app repo on your networks. So it's a pretty cool thing. It just came out recently. And people are actively using it. So I think it's a good option if you want to start using app repo and you're self-hosted. One more last thing is versioning limits, right? It's one thing I want to call out, versioning limits. And what that means is that it holds the latest 20 versions of your application. So if you're on version 25, it only holds version 25 to 21. Version 0 to 24 have been removed. So if you want to roll back, or if you're doing rapid deployment and say, oh, we start at whatever deployment or version you're on, you have to understand that it only holds 20 latest versions. All right, that's pretty much it I got for app repo. So let's stop again, take a pause and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, we have quite a few app repo questions that have popped up.
Okay.
The one that kind of makes me laugh, and I'm curious to see the answer we get for this is, which one method does ServiceNow recommend?
That's quite a nuanced question, right, Miguel? Right. And I think we have some kind of a wrap-up slide at the end to go over some of the, if then types of things. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there is like a one-size-fits-all recommendation from ServiceNow.
Absolutely. So it's a question that comes up all the time, and I'm surprised it came up this early. But yes, there isn't a prescribed direction, right? Because there's so many variables involved, right? There's so many things that are moving parts to say you must use this or you must use that, right? It really depends on a couple of things, right? Not just the technology, but do you have the right people in place, right? What does your process look like, right? And then the technology can answer that or enforce those policies, right? So is there a need, right? What is there a company mandate to use certain things? Is there, do you have the right people and the right knowledge to do this? And then, where are we going with that? What's the end goal, right? And it's again, it's just so many questions that there isn't really a recommendation. But we do say default, right? Default's always update set, right? So update sets, again, near and dear to Jared's heart, but at the end of the day, right, when in doubt, update set.
Well, and the thing that I like about app repo, which isn't, somebody in the question used the word pipeline. And so the AEMC, App Engine Management Console pipelines are dependent on app repo. And so that's in recent history, that's when I've touched this the most, is when configuring those pipelines.
And upgrade plan also is going to be using App Repo or is using App Repo. Any other questions?
I saw some earlier in chat and took a note. So Ed asks, when you get to application repository, can you detail the actual location of the repo? Like, where is the data actually living? Is this a ServiceNow data center?
Yep, it's
Yes.
another ServiceNow data center. Yeah.
And then what is the best practice for multiple developers if there's not a desire for one dev instance per developer?
I guess that goes back to the other question, right? Like, what is the best method? It really depends on the team, right? Like your team, individual team, how well they work with each other, and then your process around it, right? Because as you know,
multiple
highlighted, multiple dev instances, right? So
and
I
if
don't
multiple
know.
devs, but sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, Miguel. I was just gonna clarify that multiple could mean 3 devs or it could mean 30 devs. And so then that greatly affects the solution as well. Because I'm trying to have 30 devs in a single instance, kind of take source control off the table completely. And
we'll
I would say
right?
your own company's limitations can dictate that as well. So you know, some companies don't want their apps and such to be on, you know, a data center at ServiceNow, or their air gap because they're government, or they don't have source control that they're allowed to use. So that can also dictate what method you choose, or methods. You can use a combination of methodologies too.
Yeah, that's another option too. I think we're going to cover what we call the hybrid approach in some further slides. Sorry, I know it's not the answer you wanted to hear, but it's an honest answer, right? Like there's no real recommendation. All right, next slides. We're gonna go over the deployment strategies and architect, right? What it looks like, visual representation of each one, and obviously update sets. Jared.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, update set batches is the biggest improvement to update sets in the past 5 years. And so in this example, we're promoting the update set batch from dev to test to staging to prod. The nuance in this diagram that doesn't really get highlighted is the connection of your instances for pulling up those retrieved update sets. Are we going from dev to test, and then after it passes test, are we going from dev to staging, or is that update set batch that now lives in both the database for dev and the database for test? Are we connecting test to staging, or is staging pulling in, you know, the Sprint 22 batch directly from dev? So different organizations have different thoughts on that. But those are 2 options for setting this up. But the plan with this is it's kind of a flat structure, right? We promote things up, and then at some interval we clone down, and everything is reset back to the same standard. So there is a feature that you can read more about within your clone configuration, where it does preserve global update sets and things like that. So that exists. It's out on docs. You can read more about it. But one last comment I want to do on this current slide is my personal preference is, after you get up to prod and after the change window is closed and the dust has settled, go into your local update sets and mark them all as ignored. That way you have when you do your clone in the lower environments, it looks like there's no open update sets. Everything is just cleaned up to ignore. And then when you get to your next promotion up to prod, it's really easy to see, oh, now I only have 1 or 2 batches and I have 14 update sets. This is what has changed in this window, instead of seeing the last 900 update sets. So that's my opinion on that topic. But yeah, it's kind of a straightforward pipeline, and it does allow you to sneak in a defect or a bug fix in the same manner while keeping the rest of the development work rolling back in dev.
And batching is different from merging, right? So don't get them confused. It's two different things, right? So batching is what we emphasize. And merging,
Yeah. I think nobody does merging anymore.
nobody
So
does merging
I haven't
anymore,
heard
yeah.
that word for like a year.
I actually got brought up yesterday. I was on a call with somebody and I mentioned batching. And they're like, you mean merging? I was like, no, two different things.
Danger. Yeah. There is an option to merge. Just kind of.
Do not go down this path.
I was like, no, stop, no merging. Yeah. So just to call it out, it was brought up recently, so I just wanted to mention that here. Cool. All right, let's talk about source control, right? This is kind of the thing. So one thing I want to note is just 2 dev instances here, just to show like the complexity. But the same can be said if you're switching branches, right? So what we have here is obviously a 4 stack, right? Or 2 dev instances and a test and a prod. And then your features, right? We're talking about the different branches, right? Feature B and feature A off the main branch, and feature B commits before feature A. We talked about the rebasing, which is done after the merge, right? So you want to make sure you rebase, and that's just to make sure like the branches are in sync, right? The changes that have been committed match what you have outstanding. And this is basically what source control looks like. Well, I'm sorry, yeah, source control setup looks like. And again, I just really want to highlight that rebasing just because it can lead to problems down the road. All right. App repo. This is, again, simple outline of what app repo is. Nothing fancy to it. You commit to app repo, then you have access to any application associated to your company, right? So that's kind of the filtration on that. If you have more than 1 prod instance, for example, in the same company, the company A has 5 prod instances, those 5 instances have access to the application, right? So all it is just a simple like committing. I published app repo and now it's available for me to see. Right. And then this is what we call the hybrid approach, right? So this is both using app repo and GitHub, right? And the reason for that is for that selective publishing, right? You want to be able to do selective publishing to a certain point, right? And from there, you want to say, is this prod ready, right? Is this the gold copy? And if it is, you start using app repo to publish those apps or deploy those applications. Same concept applies to both, right? You still need to rebase, you still need to merge, you commit, you merge, you pull request. And then from, you need that server or an instance, whether it be your stage instance or your UAT test instance, whatever instance is close to prod, from that instance is where you publish to app repo, and that makes it available to everybody inside that network of companies that have access to the app repo. All right. That's pretty much it, right, for that. If anybody's any questions, any comments, raise anything, that's, feel free. Again, this is so what we have.
I think we had a few comments around the APIs. It would be nice to be able to push say update sets without having to use the CICD, I guess is the question. Because some have more configuration around it, like mid servers and all of these things. So it would be nicer to be able to push and pull those in an easier way, I guess is the question.
Right. Yeah, and I think that more so applies to. So if you're talking to a mid server through the what is it called? Connection and credential alias records, and you're setting those up. Part of those related records are app files, and so will get promoted up. And then part of them, specifically the part that stores the basic authentication passwords, do not get promoted up on purpose. They don't get captured, and so things. If you're using Integration Hub and using connection and credential alias records, it will be mid-server aware, but if you're using the REST message records, I don't remember specifically at what level the mid-server is created at. So yeah, there can be some promotion or clone down. You're accidentally trying to talk to a production mid-server that doesn't exist in dev types of scenarios.
As an aside for your hybrid approach, so just stepping back, I know at my last company, we were actually exploring and somewhat using a hybrid approach with update sets in the app repo. So, it goes back to what we were saying around, our recommendations. It's do what works best for you and your company. And sometimes that's some combination of these things.
Right. Yeah. And we just want to make you guys aware of the options and the possibilities, right? And ultimately it's whatever fits your team or your company, right? And what option to use. And we mentioned this slide. I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up. When should I use, right? The decisions for what method to use, right? So when it comes to source control, I guess this is kind of a good measurement of when to use source control. Understanding get, right? Again, we talked about the people, right? The process and the technology. And I think this is one of those where it's like, you need that knowledge of how Get repository works, right? And do you have that, right? And if you do, then I guess you can go to the next step, right? Your process has to be mature, right? It's not, you really have to understand how they're going, if you're fluid, if it's already structured. Communication coordination is key. As we mentioned, these tools don't really monitor, they're more for deployment, right? So the coordination and communication is really key aspect of making sure where goes what, who's doing what, and when and where. And then ownership, right? Clear ownership of this, right? And then once that's done, you understand the limitations, right? Single branch per dev instance, right? If you have multiple dev instances, then this could be a good fit, right? So these are some of the things that we think can help you decide if source control is for you or not.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's always a question of what your process looks like, what your team looks like. It's we had this in our discussion when we prepared the session. It's people, process, and tools. A good tool can never make up for a bad process, and it can also not make up for people not adhering to a defined good process. So your tool is always only as good as you use it. Definitely, this is the biggest recommendation, is make sure that your process is good and that people stick to the process and
Right.
follow it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that was most of what we had. We do have some more resources in the slides. I believe there's a white paper, a technical paper around this. So written by Miguel and our colleague, I think. Was it
So Andrew helped with that. Daniel also
awesome.
helped with
Daniel.
that. Yeah.
Brilliant. So we'll share the resources with the slide deck on the community post. So make sure to check in on the community after this session. I will throw some links in chat now. I would love to get some feedback directly about your experience on how you got to this academy through the community, how the sign up was. And then if you're interested in the other, yes, I'm sorry.
We got one more poll. Remember that last
poll?
poll?
Yes, the poll. I'll run the poll. We have one more poll while I talk about things. You can answer this. Yes, you're right. Okay, so this feedback session, you'll also get a second email with a small survey directly from Zoom. If you have the 2 minutes, I'd love for you to answer those. They're not too crazy. We do have more Academy sessions. I'll also put that in chat. As I mentioned before, we have mobile app academies, virtual agent, next experience, and a bunch of others. If you're interested in any of those sessions, you can find them over there and sign up directly to those sessions from this link. And then the last thing that I wanted to post is the link for this session, so you can find where to for the specific session, so you know where to go to get the resources and the Q&A. We'll go through the questions that came in through chat and through the Q&A panel after this session, and see what we have already answered, or maybe we have to research and talk to our inbound product owners, product managers, and come back to you with some more answers. We'll post those on the community as well. So be sure to subscribe to that. And then I'll also post the video recording right there. So please feel free to share this session with any of your colleagues and peers that might be interested in this. I think, well, I love the poll results.
Me too. I was going to mention that. Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, interesting poll results.
That is very interesting. It's
Yeah.
almost a third each.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's like cut right down in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope we could give many of you new input and new info, and you'll explore some of the methods you haven't used yet, and maybe they'll make your life easier or not. We'll find out.
Yeah.
If you, yeah, that is about all that I would have.
Thank you guys again. Appreciate your time. I hope it's provided some value, or at least cleared up some misconceptions you might have had, right? So thanks again.
Yes. All right. Then in that case, thank you very much, Miguel. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Paige. Paige, for joining despite your despite your throat voice kicking out. That's annoying. I hope to see many of you again. That would be awesome. And I see you next session. I will post the new sessions on the community as well. Keep an eye out over there, and I'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.